It has been rich and insightful. You've had a morning where we've come up with a recommendation. Let the researchers form advocacy group. You can approach the finance committee in your parliament. You can approach many. University of Nairobi has an innovation week. That is why you bring the industry and the partners. That is a ground for advocacy. Again, we've had that listen to the ground. And I think Kyoko emphasized, listen to the ground. Let's co-create knowledge. Let it be demand-driven. Let the researchers work with the industry. Let the research be relevant to the society. Again, there are ingredients. We need funding. The funding is a gap. The government capitation is not enough. Let's do more on funding aspect. Water, rainfall, what are we doing? We have areas where there are no rains 6 months or 3 months. West Africa, at times in the Sahel, 9 months. Can we do rainwater harvesting, water as a gap? Partnership, as we said, remains really, really vital. We must collaborate, we must work together. And we learned that a lot has been done. A lot is happening. A lot more needs to be done. But let's now do it differently. Let it be demand-driven. And let's have the farmers empowered as part of the co-creation of knowledge. Thanks, and I think we're ready now to move to the next. Thank you so much. Thanks for the great insights. We are moving to the next panel. The topic is addressing capacity gaps. Strategies for promoting inclusion for vulnerable and marginalized groups in the horticulture. I think the panelists for this session changed to Dr. Arnold Opio. I hope Opio is in the house. Dr. Opio. Welcome, Dr. Opio. This session will be moderated by Dr. Opio from Egerton University. I think he'll say who he is to the group. I know he's already been here earlier on. Other panelists are Mr. Benson Murithi Nkongo, Director of Agriculture, Kirinyaga County. If I don't pronounce your name correctly, you just forgive me. Do we have Benson Murithi around? Welcome, welcome, Benson. Then we have Ralph Ruthat, Country Director, World Vegetable Center. Applause. And finally we have Edna Barense, the staff, founder, thinker, very great. Uganda. Welcome, and I hand over to Dr. Okello to moderate the session. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will just introduce myself, maybe very briefly, because at least I've not been asked what is not in Google, so I'll keep that silent. It's not in Google because I don't want you to know, so I will not say that. I'm Arnold Opio from Egerton University. I am an associate professor of horticulture with a bias in post-harvest horticulture. I've been in horticulture for as long as I can remember. I think it's clocking to more than 40 years, having been in Egerton now for 34 years teaching. Thank you. I will now turn to my group And if you look through, we have a very rich panel here who will discuss the topic at hand. It is a topic which I think for most of us who have attended other workshops, this is something which is not usually addressed. And the topic is addressing capacity gaps, strategies for promoting inclusion for vulnerable and marginalized groups in the horticulture sector. So first, I'd like to give an opportunity to the panel members to say who they are and what they do.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning. My name is Benson Mukungo. I work in the county government of Kirinyaga. That is one of the 47 counties of Kenya. I'm basically in extension for all my working life, except for a few years where I was a teacher in agriculture in secondary schools in Kenya. And along that long life of more than 20 years, I've been working with the small-scale farmers to help improve their income and their livelihoods. Thank you.
My name is Ralph Roethaert. I'm the country director of the World Vegetable Center. The World Vegetable Center is an international agricultural research institute specialized on vegetables with the headquarters in Taiwan, and we have since 2 years now also an office in Kenya. My background is in agriculture. Been in agriculture throughout my career. Worked a lot in research and with the CGIAR, but I've also moved to the NGO sector, Farm Africa, Oxfam. Been in this region, East Africa, for more than 25 years, and happy to interact with all of you here.
Good morning. My name is Edna Barinza. I'm a founder of Finca Verde, together with my husband. He's Dutch and the brains behind the farm. My background is marketing, but passionate at agriculture also. So the two complement each other. The farm has been existent since 2014, and we are growing, and I'm happy to be part of this congregation.
Okay, thank you, members of the panel. Now, if we look at the subject that we have before us, we realize that we've had a lot of efforts being made towards, we were told not capacity building, but capacity strengthening. So we've had a lot of efforts focusing on capacity strengthening, and this has been with the aim of increasing horticultural production, improving quality, with the aim or with a focus on food security. Now, as we do this in horticulture, one of the key things is that we have said, and it has been discussed here, that horticulture can be a catalyst towards poverty alleviation. That means, therefore, that if we are focusing on poverty alleviation, we are looking at issues to do with food security, then everybody needs to be brought on board. Everybody needs to be brought on board. We leave nobody behind. You therefore realize that in the recent past, a lot of projects, whether donor-funded, as we have said, or whether even by the government, we try to also include people who may be disadvantaged in various ways. And when we talk about this, we are looking maybe at women, we are looking at youth, we are looking at people living with disabilities, we are looking at maybe widows, and so on. So all these people may be marginalized in various ways. As we look at this, we realize that various efforts have been made, but maybe there's still a lot that we need to do. So in the government projects, donor-funded projects, I think for most of us who maybe have engaged in this, you realize that there's something there which will always be asked. One of the things is always there, gender mainstreaming. And I think, was it on the first day, we were actually told that a lot of us have been talking about gender mainstreaming. You write proposal, gender mainstreaming. Once you get the funding, then you wonder, how am I going to do this gender mainstreaming? Recently, you'll be asked, how are you including the disadvantaged groups? We normally talk of what? Vulnerable and marginalized groups. So the subject before us is on this subject. How do we bring on board? What are the challenges of these VMGs if we want to bring them on board? And I would just like now to engage with the panel, so they give you a chance to engage with the panel, so that they can just tell us in their normal activities, their workplaces, or what they do they have such, or what do they experience in this? So I'll start with my immediate right.
Thank you, panel chair. As I've said, I work in the extension services, public extension services in Kirinyaga County, but before the counties came, I was part of the extension system in Kenya, and I worked in various places. One of the things that we are doing currently is to start off where the moderator stopped, the gender mainstreaming packages. Currently, in all public funded and donor funded projects, there is the element of mainstreaming of women, youth, and the people living with disabilities and other marginalized groups. That is part of the monitoring and evaluation bit of every project. So we are required to have those groups on board, and in Kirinyaga we are doing it. One of the ways we are doing that is to ensure that the leadership of all groupings, whether it's cooperatives, whether it is common interest groups we are working with, involve those three groups. Beyond that, we are also purposefully forming groups that are specific to those groups. We have women groups in the horticulture sector. We have youth groups in the horticulture sector that are doing productive activities along the value chains. Then, beyond that, we are also trying to bring in those technologies that are friendly to these groups. For example, women. We have one area where we are doing flowers in small plots, and those flowers are being exported, and majority of the farmers are women. Those flowers do not require so much input, they do not require so much physical work, and that has helped them in earning money. Something else that we are doing, the size of farms in Kirinyaga is reducing every other day, and the small farms are becoming unfriendly to men staying at home and being asked for finances to support the family. So most of the men are leaving the farms and going to get some off-farm work. As such, they are leaving the women at home. And then, for us, we have gone with the issue of diversification. Why are we diversifying? We want to generate income. We want to generate, to have food and nutrition security, and we also want to have food safety. So with those three elements, we are encouraging the women to utilize those small pieces of land to produce food that is of high nutritional value, which is feeding into the family budget and reducing the family budget. And beyond that, there is surplus which is being sold in the local markets. Most of the players in the sale of that produce is women. But the youth are coming in as service providers in two ways. One is transportation. using the border borders, the two-wheel border borders, the three-wheel border borders. But we have also trained a cohort of young people who are community support workers in agriculture and more so in horticulture. So with those, we are able to work. They generate a bit of income for themselves, but they also generate knowledge and income for the farmers. Over and above that, we have also funds. These are national funds, but even within, we have allocated funds for women and youth groups that support them in generating income from the horticulture very soon. There are many other things we are doing, but for now I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say something about vulnerable and marginalized groups. I did launch a poll on the WUVA app. Yeah, now it's too late. We got 10 responses, and the question was, what does your organization do in terms of inclusion of vulnerable and marginalized groups? And in terms of, do you include it in your strategies, organizational strategies and activities? And there are 4 possible answers. We include it in both our strategies and activities, or B, we only do it, include it in our strategies, but we don't implement it, or C, we don't have a strategy, but we do it on the ground in our activities, or D, we don't do anything at all. So which one do you think is the correct answer? Which has the highest responses? No guess? Actually, there were 10 responses. 7 of the responses said, yes, we do include vulnerable and marginalized communities in our strategies, and 3 of you responded, we do include it in our activities. Yeah, so very good results. Yeah, but those are only 10 responses, and we are here more than 50 people. So it might not be a complete representation, but the message is, yes, we need to include this in our strategies, not only our activities, because if we include it in our strategies, we can be more efficient and targeted towards reaching out and creating impact. And I want to share with you a story about a vulnerable lady in a marginalized community that we worked with in one of the Feed the Future funded programs. It was called Home Garden Scaling in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Cambodia, and Liberia. And this lady lived in Kiteto, in Kiteto district in Tanzania, very dry district. It is one of the only districts that doesn't have a water body. Yet we targeted that district because it was a Feed the Future target zones, because it focused on malnutrition, dealing with malnutrition, tackling it through home gardens, so making people grow their vegetables. This lady, Manaidi, she's a widow. She's old. She's a grandmother. Her daughter left, but she left her 3 children, so she's taking care of 3 grandchildren, and she has to feed them. So now you would think, okay, how can she possibly manage that? So the Home Garden Scaling Initiative was one of those initiatives that targeted vulnerable and marginalized people through seed kits, providing training of how to grow these seed kits, simple technologies that can be done, and proper training even for illiterate or untrained people, and having facilitators from the organizations in those districts. When I visited her, and when you go there from Arusha, it's a 7-hour journey. You go through Tarangire, the other side of the national park. I really recommend. It's a beautiful journey, even to go and see Manaida. So she had a beautiful garden, and I asked, so how do you manage that? She said, well, I buy water. Yeah, there's these borders. They go and fetch water. There's a well like 10 kilometers away, and you pay 100 shillings for a bucket for a mtungi of water. I buy 10 of them, and I irrigate my home garden with 5 buckets in the morning and 5 buckets in the evening. That's 1,000 shillings. So I was wondering, really? Can you spend all that money just on water? She said, yes, I do that because if I don't spend that money on my water, I have to buy vegetables for way more than 1,000 shillings. So actually that 1,000 shillings, it was a great investment. So this is just an example of how resilient some vulnerable and marginalized people can be with a little bit of support in terms of seed kits, good advice, and motivation to carry on. So the challenges that we have seen, for vulnerable and marginalized people, and I'm talking about women, youth, widows, orphans, people with disabilities, is resources, time poverty, mobility, capital, credit, self-esteem, marginalization, illiteracy. So how do you deal with that in terms of your strategies in your organization or your program? Well, in terms of resources, people don't have land sometimes, but the local governments have land, the villages have land, and we saw in this program, for instance, that women come together and get allocated a piece of land by the village head and do wonderful jobs. Which brings us to the next element of collective action. One person alone can't do anything, particularly if you have little resources. But together, you're able to have a bigger voice and access resources. Time poverty. This lady who is dealing with, she has to cultivate her land, take care of the children, cook food for the whole family. She cannot go away and participate in a 1 day, 2 or 3 days training course. So if you really want to include those people who have a little time on their hand, target your place, the location of the training, and make your training very short, just a few hours. So that is not very early in the morning, like in between of the day, so that they can have time to go back and prepare food. Capital. Resource poor people don't have capital. Reduce the fees. Collective action is powerful, but a group is automatically exclusive. It excludes people because it's a group. So when you're not a member, you're excluded, and you're excluded because you don't pay fees. So reduce the fees for certain people. Self-esteem and illiteracy. Training on technical subjects is very important, like how to grow vegetables, how to do an integrated pest management. But equally, talk about the position of women, talk about the position of widows, talk about the position of orphans in the community, not only with those vulnerable people, but with all the people who have the power, with the men, with the fortunate people. So that part of the training and capacity building is equally important as technical capacity. I think those are a few elements that I wanted to highlight.
As an employer, I'm going to talk in our capacity as an employer, how we include the VMGs, in short. Yeah, our company employs about 56 people, and out of those 56, about 41 are women. Women who are single mothers, women who are below 20 years, women who are disabled. a few who are married, very few who are married. The other number is mostly youth, young boys. And as much as we would love to have more people, or more boys, or young men, the people who approach us mostly are women. Now, these women, how do we include them in the whole picture? Of course, we provide the labor, but being a self-sustaining company, that is not, it's not sustainable for them because, single mothers, they have children, husbands left. So how do we help them? As a company, we do on-site, in-site trainings. Some things we do like occupational health. We train them on how to grow whatever we are growing and encourage them to pick on whatever we are doing. We give them also developmental loans against their meager salaries and encourage them maybe try and get a piece of land, lease. Of course, the land is not available. Lease the land and do something. Plant greens and sell to the local community. Plant eggplants. You're learning how it is working here. Try and transport that the other side. And it is working. The ladies are happy. The youth are happy because we train them on occupational health. The youth are mainly for the spraying part and the manual part. And they copy and go out and be used as consultants. And it's working well. They are happy. But there's still a gap. And how do we fill that gap? So we go to the local council and say, do you have people here who are willing to come and learn? She's hands-on in the village and she'll know which youth is available or which youth is willing. And that is also a gap we are filling because we are dealing directly with the people on the ground. So the local council is also helping us. So what are we saying? We are saying that as a company we can only do enough. We can only do what we can. But there are other gaps that have to be filled. I think if we try to encourage the government to implement legal policies that allow youth as young as, because we get so many people, very young people willing to work. I'll give you an example. My son is turning 19 this year, but he has so many financial dreams. He wants to work here, he wants to work there. At the moment, he decided, no, I'm not going to help you people on the farm anymore because you're paying me peanuts. So he decided to go to Holland. And he's doing something during his he's in his vacation. But these guys are very willing to work because they have their own financial needs. So if the government would implement policies that allow even people as young as 15 to work, we get so many young children who want to work during the vac, but government is restraining us. You cannot child labor. So I think such things would help a lot to fill the gap. The other thing is accessibility to land. From our experience, our employees are leasing from other people, from subtenants, and then they again sublease, and then they grow for the season something, cassava, whatever, just to supplement on their livelihoods, which is okay. But we are saying, is it possible to promote community networks? If the government can work with the local councils, you talked about nucleus farm, but I even didn't know there was things like nucleus farm. How will the people on the ground know So maybe there has to be like programs on TV or radio, newspapers, for the people right at the grassroots to understand that, yeah, these things are available. On that point, I was also thinking about the same thing, strengthening family and community. A good example I could think about, like our own scenario, we are encouraging the children to take interest in what we are doing, because we have to continue. I mean, time will come when we cannot do it ourselves. And the young girl is helping with the packing, because ladies are very articulate with what they do. I think that is why we also have more ladies in certain departments. But I was thinking of the scenario of my brother Nabong. He has also taken over the family business. I think also encouraging family ties to continue with whatever family businesses is also a good way to cover the gap. The accessibility to agric loans. For us, we give, because of the URA constraints, we cannot really give our people more than they earn in 3 months as a salary loan. And that can only take them so far. But agric loans in Uganda are almost not there. If they are there, it is only the big fish who can access them. Now, how do we get these young women, all men, all marginalized groups to access those kind of loans? And even if they accessed, the terms that come with those loans are ridiculous. So how do we find something to fit into this situation? And I'm thinking maybe agric microfinance schemes, something like that. The government is doing a lot about Operation Wealth Creation, parish model, but the groups that are targeted are not in the horticulture line. So maybe government should also look at horticulture, improve people's health. Let us do this for the horticulture sector, because agriculture is big and most people fear to get into perishables. But there has to be something done in that line.
Okay, maybe
I think I will stop there. There are so many points to put out, but let me just say one thing, that the youth, to include them in all this, they also need a voice. They need a voice. They need to be heard. Bringing something and just dumping it on them will not help. Let them bring in their ideas. Create community centers where they can talk. They can bring experiences or listen to people who have gone through successful stories.
Okay, thank you very much.
Those are the few points.
Okay, thank you very much. We've heard from the extension perspective. We've also heard from the World Vegetable Center, and we've heard from Edna as an employer. Maybe back to the extension service, and you've given us an insight on some of the things you are doing to address or to include these groups. So, just in a nutshell, maybe in a minute or two, could you possibly point out, as you work with this group, what are some of the challenges that come in? More so when we are talking about those who are really physically disabled. How do you really Or how can we include them so that they fully benefit from horticulture?
Thank you. One of the issues that they are facing, especially the people living with disabilities, is we are still not very sensitive to the infrastructure designs that we are using in most of our facilities. As we develop for example, the market infrastructure, there is need to incorporate disability-friendly designs in that. The other area where there is a problem is they will get the resources as families. But like was said a while ago, when women discover that money is coming in from something, we want to own it. So to circumvent or to blunt that impact, we have two things we are doing. One of them is a financial literacy training and family budgeting. That is part of the gender mainstreaming packages. And there is also something else we are calling holistic economic empowerment for families, where we treat the family as an entity and we train them how to look for resources and utilize them. Water availability is a real issue, and so there are efforts to increase the amount of water into the farms for irrigation. That will save time for the women and those other vulnerable groups. Markets for what they are growing. It is also a challenge because most of them are small-scale growers and they are not getting fair returns to their work. And so the researchers who are doing this work, when you come up with something that can be of help to these groups, please address the whole value chain so that they can have a reason to keep going. And then we are also doing aggregation. But something more important, horticulture may not stand alone. So it's also important for us to look at what can complement, what can earn these groups income in a short while, which income they can use to plow into the horticulture subsector, because it requires inputs like fertilizers, seeds, some of which are so expensive. So in Kirinyaga, we are also incorporating other value chains or other enterprises that will earn the same groups income, like keeping bees, keeping chicken, which can earn the money in a short while. And then, of course, I would really want to request the research centers. There is a time we used to have CRAC, Center Research Advisory Committees. They died some time ago. Please, if there is a way you can revive that, it will give focus to your research at the universities when you are having your open days. For those of us who may not come to a university, create virtual platforms where we can also participate and we'll get this. The students, Mwalimu, by the way, he was a teacher where I was schooling in my first degree. When you send students to us for research, they come, they gather the data, go back to their university. We never see what they have done. We never see the results of those researches. So kindly, if you send your students to the counties and then you get back the reports, kindly share that. It is important for us because we can employ some of that knowledge to help improve our farmers. Thank you.
Now, back to you, Raf. You gave us a very practical example of how these groups can actually be assisted and that actually they can really benefit. Have you had an opportunity where you have found people from the marginalized groups really coming to your center seeking for knowledge or seeking for assistance, and how do you handle this?
I want to give an example of actually not related to vegetables, but I think the principle applies. And this was when I worked for Farm Africa, and we were facilitating an initiative in Rakai district in Uganda. And Rakai district was known and had a history of HIV/AIDS affected. A lot of orphans, a lot of people who don't have parents. So there was an initiative there that we facilitated. It was focused on local chicken business, and we found that actually the orphans who are running households, these are kids that some were not even adults, they were very successful, and they were more successful than any other person in that area, because they were driven. They were convinced that they have a disability. In their case, they don't have parents, they are marginalized, but they wanted to prove that they could make it. And in the chicken value chain, there's so many businesses. You can rear fertilized eggs. There was crossbreeding of the local chicken with improved breeds. You can sell chicks. You can sell broilers. You can sell eggs. So they made a huge impact, and they actually were also educated through the project. They managed to keep records, they managed to keep businesses. Some started to provide inputs through agro-vet stores, providing the inputs in the chicken business. So, and we haven't had those kind of examples yet in the vegetable value chains, but I think it's coming, particularly when we're moving towards more regenerative agriculture, where inputs instead of chemical inputs, we are now focusing on biopesticides. There's a huge range of new technologies that we work on and that we promote, such as sticky traps, pheromone traps, beneficial fungicides. So these are opportunities that through our teaching farmers want, but they cannot access. And I think we need to engage with people who might not be able to dig in the ground because of any kind of disabilities, and including youth who might not want to be digging in the ground, but who have the intellectual capacity and the business drive to create businesses and really drive their own future.
Now back to you, Edna. You've given us a very good insight of how you're working, especially with the youth. What do you think, or have you faced any challenges, especially when you're talking about most of the staff you have are single mothers? And most of the time, I think even most of us in this room, when you see or you hear about single mother, you're a bit shaky that this person might leave any time. And do you face such challenges, or how do you retain them? So maybe in just a minute you can give us your views.
We have been very lucky, actually. Our labor dropout is very minimal, partly because we deal directly with the community around us, and that helps a lot, because we are in the village, deep in the village. That is where we are located, and these people need the jobs. So we try to make it as lucrative as possible to keep them on. We try as much as possible to engage them and also make them feel part of the whole system. You'll be surprised, we consult these ladies and the ideas they come up with. We as the bosses, we even don't. You ask them, so how can we arrange this, because we face challenges as farmers, of course. Sometimes they'll tell you, yeah, we have taken long to replace the weeding hose, and we are not on the ground to see that. And they say, no, we need to buy this size of hoe. And I'm a marketer, I don't know what sizes are available in the market. But we engage them. We engage them and make them part of the whole system. And that helps them also feel like a family, kind of. So I think just building trust and having the open doors and listening to them, giving them a voice to air out what they think can work and not work, because they are the people on the field, I think has helped us retain our employees. And we don't turn away people, actually. Sometimes we get even the really old people. And we try to put them in departments like maybe slashing, maintaining gardens around the house, just to give them a livelihood. Then you get the lame, then you say, okay, we shall put them in the planting department where they can only just sit and plant the seeds in the trays. So that has helped us, I think.
Okay, thank you. Now we have heard from our three panelists. We've been given an insight on what the extension is doing. And maybe I'll just vouch on what our panelist here, Benson, had said. I do know that, for example, in most of the counties, there is a World Bank project with the government where they are actually supporting farmers. And I think it is a requirement that you must include the vulnerable and marginalized groups. So, for example, I know in Kajiado there are groups working on tomatoes. Now, at this juncture, the chief moderator, I would like to open the discussion to the participants in this work. They may need, or they have some points to add, or they may want to seek some clarification, especially considering that usually we tend to forget about the VMGs in our workshops.
To the floor, thank you.
Mine is just quite brief. East Africa hosts a very big number of refugees. I don't know if any of you had interacted with that, and how have you handled the situation? Because I know in Uganda, they are introducing a policy of self-reliance, where maybe if a World Food Program cannot provide constantly, so they are trying to look at empowering these farmers through different ways. But in most cases, the land which is available is small, and we all know that the productivity of a small piece of land can majorly go in horticultural crops. So I really don't know how that one has been handled from your experiences. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, panelists. You cannot talk about production and productivity without actually factoring in the issue of gender mainstreaming. And coming to the extension, I think practically in Uganda you'll find that extension is predominantly offered by the male officers, and yet they are offering services that at the primary production that is also predominantly occupied by female and all women. So you find that the husbands are actually complaining, thinking that maybe a different business is happening. So I want to learn from you what is the experience in Kenya and how you're addressing it. Lastly, I'm happy to mention that I'm one of the architects of the family farming model, which we developed in 2014, and we recommended it to the UN, which was adopted, and they declared a decade of family farming, which now is supposed to be promoted at small household level. I want to find out from the Finkavad how this is going to be helpful to you and how you are actually practically applying it. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, what I have done at home is real. I have been able to identify the different talents of my children. I have 5 children. I don't mind about what their calling is in terms of profession, but I have been able to have farm engineers, I have farm technicians, farm media experts, and farm artists. And I'm interesting them really to appreciate. I don't mind whether they are going to be engineers, but how much can they contribute to the agricultural development? And to that effect, we are now developing what we call the farm succession plans. And my children have been able to develop a song, and they have been paid for. Myself, I want him to play for 1 second, and you hear what they have been able to compose. So if we are to have the future generations into the agricultural development, it starts now.
Agriculture is a backbone, the backbone of Uganda and Africa, the mother of the world. We thank you, Lord, for the soils and the climate we have, the pearl of Africa, Uganda. Agriculture is a backbone of Uganda and Africa, the mother of the world. We thank you, Lord, for the soils and the climate we have, the pearl of Africa, Uganda, your place. When I compare the nations in Uganda, I praise the Lord. Your nature is amazing. Your fruits are natural and fresh for health. What a game agriculture in you. Agriculture.
Dr. Pio, 2 more, and then I get back to you.
Thank you. I think after that, it's the energized is from within. Yeah. So just to add to what he just said, the whole issue of youth. I don't know what they call it in Uganda or Ethiopia. In Kenya, I was just going to add to the youth involvement. How can we leverage this drive to empower youth through 4K clubs? You know, 4K clubs were there when I was a student in high school, but now there's a push from government to empower the young people in schools through 4K clubs. So we need to leverage that. And so, Dr. Pio, I don't know what it is in Ethiopia or Uganda, but that is an opportunity we need to tap into. 2, yesterday we talked about the youth not wanting to really farm, but then in our group, we said that when you go to the market, after the waste we talked about at the marketplace, how do we get youth to actually get that what would otherwise go to waste in value add? That's opportunity. How do we tap into that? Thank you.
Thank you. The last one. We are running out of time. Okay. Others you can discuss during the coffee break.
Okay, thank you. Mine is just a brief addition into what the panel have said. As KEFIS, we normally include this vulnerable group in our work plan every year. For example, we normally train the women groups in various counties on nurseries and good agricultural practices. We also give the people living with disabilities, we normally in conjunction with the county governments, we give them seedlings for fruits and vegetables, and we encourage them to plant these seedlings. We even advise them on how to grow them and the good agricultural practices. So actually, this vulnerable group, we normally include them as an NPPO in our work plan every year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe just a quick one on what Professor Mbuko has mentioned about the 4K clubs. I think this is an opportunity where we can actually bring in the youth seriously when it comes to horticulture. I also remember that when I was in school, we had 4K clubs. One of the things which maybe from Egerton, what we are doing or what we are advocating now is that if as a researcher you have a project with farmers in most of those rural areas, then we encourage the researcher to adopt a school, a primary school or whether it's a secondary school, where you support them by setting up small gardens in the school where they can grow their vegetables and so on. I think this is an opportunity which we need to look at. Now, moving very fast because we are more out of time, I would like to ask Ralph to respond to the first question, which was about interaction with the refugees. After that, I would ask Benson to respond to about gender mainstreaming with regard to production and productivity. Maybe, Ralph, you can respond to the two at the same time because there's the family farming model. Was that also for you? Oh, it's for you. Okay, good. So you will respond to that. So we'll start with you, come to Benson, then back to Edna. Thank you.
The refugees. So World Vegetable Center has a concept called seed kits, and I've got an example on the booth there. And seed kits are actually is a bag with tiny sachets of seeds that grow very fast. That are designed for getting people back on track in the refugee camps or when they are recuperating from disasters, internally displaced people. So we've been distributing seed kits, thousands of seed kits in Somalia, for instance, and we've had requests in South Sudan and in Uganda and in Tanzania. The idea is that you provide the seed kits, germplasm, seeds that can be grown quickly and that can produce food within a couple of weeks. Some amaranth varieties that you can harvest within 4 weeks after planting, and then coupled with technical advice. Now, it works very well if you get access to the farmers. Unfortunately, in a lot of refugee camps, you are not allowed to enter. And refugees inside the camp are often not allowed to go out. And water is also a major issue. So there's some political issues, there's some regulatory issues that actually need to be worked on to create the impact in the facility of actually people refugees utilizing these seed kits. On the same seed kits, we're working on collaborating with the 4K Club program in Kenya, and we're also giving those seed kits and providing them to several schools in Kenya so that they can grow a range of vegetables in the gardens.
Thank you. For the issue of men going to do extension services and extending beyond the horticulture, it used to be there long ago before I became an adult, but nowadays it is not there for two reasons. One, when officers get into service, they are properly inducted on the do's and don'ts as they provide extension services, and that is monitored for purposes of making sure that we do not get, as we get calves, we also get extension babies. We don't want that. The other thing is that because of the numbers of the extension officers, like we raised yesterday, we are doing more of group extension than individual farm extension. Individual farm extension is on those demand-driven cases which are very specific, and most likely the farmer who is asking for that has a specific interest that needs to be addressed. And sometimes it's not even the field person who is addressing that, it is addressed at a higher level. And many times you don't go alone. You go as a team. So in those two ways, we are able to address that. I've not heard of such cases in the very recent past, and I believe that will continue. So that is taken care of. 4K and not just 4K clubs, but even with young farmers in secondary schools. There is a policy framework, if I'm not wrong, on how to incorporate and reinvigorate the 4K clubs and the young farmers. And there is one project, although it is aquaculture based, it is really into starting activities that are horticulture based in the primary schools and the secondary schools. They are adopting in every county, they are adopting 2 schools to start with, and this will be expanded. But there is a specific project of youth in agriculture, which is being spearheaded by the Ministry of Agriculture, and I believe this will go a long way in creating that demand or that sense of agricultural orientation right from the word go. Thank you.
I can see the chief is eyeing us.
I'm going to be brief. The question was how I am going to merge the family into the business. The children have been taken through all departments. The girl is 14, the boy is turning 19 soon, and they have been through all the departments, from the planting to the weeding to the harvesting to the packing. And during the process, we have looked and seen their strengths and their weaknesses. Unfortunately, they do not like to get dirty. But we are saying, okay, it is fine. The boy is keen on opening up so many things and trying out this. The pump is dead. Let me try and repair it. He is going to do engineering, and he is. We are targeting him to look after the mechanical parts of the farm. He is also very good with his numbers, that we realized. At the moment, he has been helping us with the EFRIS, with the books of the farm, with his dad. The girl is more neat and meticulous, and so she has been working in the department of packing, and that is where her strength is. But she has tried all the other departments. So we try, like they say, charity begins at home. We try as much as possible to involve them so that they can pick, but we cannot force them. We don't want to collapse the company.
Okay, Edna, your parting shot. In 10 seconds, what's your parting shot?
Parting shot. What can I say? Finca Verde's logo is a healthy diet, is a healthy body, and I would encourage everybody, whatever stakeholders or the government or private sector, to please encourage the horticulture sector, because we all need to be alive.
Ralph?
Regarding vulnerable and marginalized groups and individuals, look beyond challenges, look at capabilities and talents and exploit them.
Benson?
Let's go the value chain way in research so that you can be able to address all points of the value chain, and that we will be able to get them on board. Thank you.
Okay, to the audience, thank you very much for your participation. To the chief moderator, thank you for... Actually, we didn't eat into anybody's time. Some people ate into our time. So we are in time. Thank you.
A round of applause to the panelists. My take home for this session is inclusivity. There is no program, intervention, or initiative that you are going to undertake without incorporating gender perspectives, looking at the groups that are vulnerable and marginalized. So no program, no project starts without thinking of gender transformative approach. Thank you. The session we are running now is priorities for future research, capacity building, and investment for profitable and competitive horticulture sector in East Africa. The moderator for this session is Dr. Jessica Mbaka, Institute Director, Carlo. Let's welcome Jessica Mbaka in case she's in the Peru. Jessica? Jessica, so much time is eaten on you guys will see how the lunch will come. The panelists for this, we have Professor Willis Owino, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Welcome. We have Kirubel Getashu, IPM manager, from Ethiopia. Get from Ethiopia. You will say more on your. And then we have Anja. This is tough. The fish. This I'm unable to pronounce. Help me out. Fighter. The fighter. Anja, the fighter. Welcome. So welcome. I just hand over to Dr. Jessica to moderate and introduce the panelists. Thank you. Where's the